Imagine a world where empires crumble like sandcastles beneath the tide. Babylon, Assyria, Lydia, each mighty in its time, but destined to fall. Now picture a man rising from the dust of obscurity, a king born not into glory but into survival, leading a tribe few took seriously, until he rewrote the fate of nations. This is not just a story of conquest. This is the story of an empire that defied the rules of power, crushed the old world order, and introduced a revolutionary idea: rule not just by fear, but by respect. This is the rise of Persia's mighty empire, a civilization so vast and visionary it would stretch from the banks of the Indus to the shores of the Aegean, forging the blueprint for every great empire that followed. And it all began with one man, Cyrus the Great. In the 6th century BCE, the world was fractured. Mesopotamia trembled under the weight of its own decay, while rival kingdoms fought bitterly over scraps of power. In the highlands of Anshan, in what is now southwestern Iran, a tribal prince named Cyrus II watched these crumbling empires with the eyes of a hawk. He wasn't born into grandeur. His father, Cambyses Thars, was a vassal king, subordinate to the overlords of the Median Empire. But young Cyrus saw something others didn't. Where others bowed, he planned. Where others feared, he dreamed. And when the moment came, he pounced. In 550 BCE, he led a revolt against his Median overlords, and won. But Cyrus didn't slaughter his enemies or burn their cities to ash. Instead, he absorbed their strength, married their customs into his own, and declared something unthinkable for the age. The Persian Empire would not destroy its subjects, it would unite them. Cyrus's model was radical. Conquer, yes, but conquer with purpose. When he entered Babylon in 539 BCE, he was not met with arrows but with cheers. The priests of Marduk, the city's god, welcomed him as a liberator. Cyrus didn't tear down temples, he restored them. He freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. He issued the Cyrus Cylinder, a decree etched in clay that's often considered the world's first human rights charter. This wasn't just politics, it was psychological warfare on an imperial scale. Cyrus understood something timeless. Power is not just about the sword, it's about the story. Under his leadership, Persia became more than an empire. It became an idea. A multi-ethnic, multi-faith, administratively sophisticated civilization that managed to hold together a quarter of the known world. And when Cyrus died in battle in 530 BCE, he wasn't just mourned by Persians, but by Medes, Babylonians, Jews, and Greeks. His tomb at Pasargadae, a simple stone structure, still stands, weathered by time but unbroken, just like the legacy he left behind. But the Persian Empire wasn't built by one man alone. After Cyrus came Cambyses II, who extended Persian rule into Egypt, a feat that even Babylon had failed to accomplish. Cambyses was ambitious but erratic. His reign was cut short, likely by his own instability, and it paved the way for one of the most legendary rulers in human history, Darius I, also known as Darius the Great. Darius didn't just rule Persia, he engineered it. He reorganized the empire into satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap who answered directly to the king. He introduced standardized coinage, a unified legal code, and an extensive network of roads, the most famous being the Royal Road, which stretched over 1,600 miles and allowed messages to travel from one end of the empire to the other in just a week. Think about that. In a world without electricity, the Persian communication system rivaled modern efficiency. But Darius wasn't just a bureaucrat. He was a builder and a warrior. He commissioned the construction of Persepolis, a city of marble columns and gold-laced walls that would become the ceremonial heart of the empire. He led military campaigns from the Indus Valley to the Danube River, carving the name of Persia into the bones of the earth. And yet, he too understood the balance of fear and favor. He respected local religions and allowed subject peoples to maintain their traditions, as long as they paid tribute and recognized his sovereignty. The Persian strategy wasn't to erase cultures, it was to envelop them. Still, No empire ascends without challenges. In 499 BCE, the Ionian Greek cities under Persian control rebelled, sparking the first flames of what would become the Greco-Persian Wars. Darius struck back hard, crushing the revolt and then turning his eyes westward, determined to bring mainland Greece under Persian rule. In 490 BCE, his forces landed at Marathon. The battle was swift, brutal, and ended in Persian defeat, a rare stain on Darius's otherwise glittering record. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a rivalry that would echo for centuries. After Darius's death, his son Xerxes the Great took the throne, inheriting both the crown and the grudge. In 480 BCE, he launched one of the largest invasions the ancient world had ever seen. Over 100,000 men crossing the Hellespont on pontoon bridges, a logistical marvel. He faced off against the Spartans at Thermopylae, where 300 warriors became legends by delaying the Persian advance. But Xerxes didn't stop. He captured and burned Athens, though his fleet would soon be decimated by the cunning of the Greek navy at the Battle of Salamis. For all its might, Persia had met a foe that wouldn't bow, and the tides of history began to shift. But the empire didn't collapse. Not yet. Even in the face of Greek resistance, Persia remained a colossus, ruling over Egypt, Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and beyond. It continued to thrive for another 150 years, not through brute force alone, but through diplomacy, innovation, and cultural fusion. The Persian postal system became a model for later empires. Their art influenced styles from India to Anatolia. Their engineers built qanats, underground aqueducts that transformed deserts into farmland. Their scribes recorded knowledge that would one day be translated into Greek, Arabic, and Latin, feeding the libraries of Alexandria and eventually the Renaissance. Persia's tolerance was not weakness, it was strategy. Unlike many empires that ruled by crushing dissent, the Achaemenid Persians often chose negotiation over annihilation. And this approach worked until the arrival of a storm from the west. In 334 BCE, a young Macedonian king named Alexander crossed into Asia Minor with a burning ambition to conquer the world and topple Persia. His name was Alexander the Great, and he saw himself as the avenger of Greece, the liberator of Asia, and the heir to both Cyrus and Achilles. What followed was a whirlwind of battle, betrayal, and destiny. In just a few short years, Alexander defeated the Persian king Darius III in a series of crushing battles, Granicus, Issus, and finally Gaugamela in 331 BCE. With Darius dead and his empire in chaos, Alexander marched triumphantly into Persepolis. But instead of respecting its grandeur, he burned it, possibly as revenge for Xerxes' burning of Athens. The flames consumed not just marble and gold, but centuries of knowledge, art, and memory. It was the symbolic end of an era. Yet even Alexander, the supposed conqueror, couldn't destroy what Persia stood for. He adopted Persian customs, wore their royal robes, married a Persian princess, and tried to merge East and West into one super civilization. In death, he was buried in the Persian tradition, acknowledging the power and majesty of the empire he had tried to consume. But Persia did not die with Alexander. It transformed. The Seleucids, the Parthians, the Sassanids, all traced their legitimacy back to the Achaemenid legacy. Even long after the empire's borders faded, its influence endured in architecture, language, administration, and myth. The idea of Persia as a place of wisdom, elegance, and unity would ripple through time, shaping Islam, inspiring European monarchs, and echoing in the founding philosophies of modern governance. It's no exaggeration to say that Persia, more than any other ancient empire, built the scaffolding of the civilized world. Today, when we talk about empires, we often focus on Rome, Greece, or Egypt. But Persia was different. It wasn't built to entertain or simply to dominate. It was built to last. Its rulers weren't just warriors. They were visionaries. They created a system where people from dozens of ethnicities and faiths could coexist under a common banner. They harnessed the power of infrastructure, tolerance, and symbolism to craft something bigger than any one king or city. Persia's greatness wasn't in its armies. It was in its ability to absorb, adapt, and endure. So the next time you hear about the rise and fall of empires, remember Persia. Remember the boy from Anshan who became a king of kings. Remember the road that spanned continents. Remember the fire that lit the sky above Persepolis, and the wisdom that refused to die in the ashes. This was not just an empire, it was an idea. And ideas, as history shows us, are far harder to destroy than cities. Persia may have been forged in battle, but it survived through brilliance. And that, above all, is why its legacy still burns bright, like a torch passed through the ages, waiting to ignite the next great dream.